All right, here we go. Welcome to Joshua Kemble's live stream. I'm Joshua Kemble. This is episode 281. On this episode, we're going to work on comic pages. So we're working on making the roughs for page 81 of my graphic novel for Turner Publishing, called Not Death But Love, the Strange Supernatural Story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And along with that, we're also going to be potentially maybe listening to some YouTube videos and doing some commentary and just kind of hanging out and working on art. I'm Joshua Kemble. I've been an art director for about 7 years, actually going on 8 now, or maybe it's over 8. It's hard to kind of keep track. Professionally, so that's what I do for my day job, and then when I'm not doing that, I'll work on graphic design and illustration, which I've been doing professionally for over 20 years. And when I'm not doing that, I work on things like graphic novels, like Jacob's Apartment and 2 Stories, which are my current graphic novels that are out right now. I really encourage you guys to pick those up and check them out if you're curious to read and support indie comics that talk about life stuff and aren't just capes and tights. So yeah, that's my intro. I have one more thing that I have to kind of mention here, which is there's been some strange interference in my house. I'm not quite sure what's been going on, but it's been very fascinating to kind of see. So I don't know what's been happening with that. Oh, I was trying to make this happen.
There it is. Welcome to Joshua Kremble's stream. I am the host with the most on the Kremlin stream. We're going to work on comic books all night long.
Did that work? I have to know if you guys are watching. Well, I don't know. Chat's pretty dead right now, but I'm kind of curious if that actually showed up. I don't know what came over me there. That's kind of nutty. Okay. Anyhow, so let's get back to let's get back to comic books.
Let's see what we can do tonight to make art work out of nothing.
Okay. I think I got it out of my system. I hope that worked. The problem is I won't know until I watch it back live. But I guess it's worth mentioning, I had a little voice changer app that gives little sound effects and stuff like that. And so I thought it would be funny to kind of rock that business. All right, let's get to our main stream and let's make this happen. Let's see what happens. I mean,
who knows what shall occur?
Okay. I'm done with the voice changing. Okay, so let's go to our daily stream. Oh no, my Wacom's detached. My Wacom is detached, so I got to give it like 2 seconds. But let's go to the daily stream anyway, so you can kind of check this out. So this is where we left off last time on page 81 on the rough. So there's our thumbnail and basically our list of what we're going to basically be working on roughs for. And on top of that, we're going to basically just see how far we can get. Hopefully, I have a hard out at 2 a.m. And so we'll probably stream till about 2 a.m. For anybody following along, having possibly a drink or something like that, I've been really digging micheladas lately. So I've been having a chelada naranja picosa, which I think is like orange michelada. So that is extremely tasty. Extremely tasty. Yeah. So, okay. Let's see here. What else can we do? I'm also going to pull up more useful sound effects. Let's see here. And that should work really well. Okay. I think we're good. I think we are good. All right. Let me, I want to find a good collection before we kind of get into this business. If you guys are watching, I hope you are doing well. I hope you're having a rad night full of a lot of awesome productivity and all sorts of stuff like that. And we are going to rock and roll. So, okay. The one thing here that we're going to have to do first is kind of get our panel borders in order. And that rhymed and was not intentionally rhyming. And then from there, we'll kind of get to actualizing this thumbnail as a rough. So let's get into it. Had a pretty good day today. It's crazy busy at my workplace because we're all ramping up for the long holiday coming up. I have Monday and Tuesday off, which I'm really excited about. But man, a lot of those art orders start coming in, and it's a lot of people trying to get a lot done by Friday. So we're caught up and on track and stuff like that. And so that creates a very tiring situation, which isn't too bad. The only problem is I ended up missing yesterday, but no excuses. Like Frank Salazar always says, make comics, not excuses. And I like that. Okay, let's see. Let's get rid of our extras here. And we can go ahead and turn off our list for a second. And actually, we probably do want those extras. So what we're going to do is basically get the layout matching the layout above. And that's what we're going to work on. You'll notice down here below me is the script that I'm working from. This is a historical fiction graphic novel about the Brownings, the two poets. And it's, it's actually pretty cool. It is very cool story, actually. It's kind of like if you took Sherlock Holmes, like the Jeremy Brett version, you mixed it with Downton Abbey or something like that. That would be what this book kind of feels like. It's Victorian era theme, and it's all about exploring Elizabeth Barrett Browning's interest in seances and all sorts of other crazy things like that. So the page that we're working on, just to get in the frame of what we're doing, and I'll try to kind of work whilst talking about this. So the framing of what we're working on here is Robert has taken Elizabeth Barrett Browning after they've had an argument because he had kind of he lost his temper with their guests because one of his guests is like a charlatan. To their house, he and Elizabeth have kind of a rough night, and then after that he decides to take Elizabeth to a play, or not a play, but like a magic show of a guy named Bosco at a local Italian theater. So they have front row seats because, again, Elizabeth is a little bit of a celebrity at this point. And they enjoyed the show, and now they've been asked to meet Bosco backstage. Bosco is a real magician who actually existed at the time. And it's kind of interesting because it takes place in a real theater. However, the nice thing, for just kind of, I guess, freedom's sake, it's kind of nice. I don't have to worry too much on this page about historical accuracy to the backstage of the theater, because a lot of this whole sequence is invented even though it's real historical figures, it's kind of filling in the blanks of some of the details that were not in Elizabeth's letters. And so most of this story is based on letters that were written between Elizabeth and her family and Elizabeth and her husband, which are all kind of like available to the public, and kind of spurred this whole plot. That's very, very based in reality. So even though it's historical fiction, it's shocking how much of this isn't fiction and how much is. And I remember when I first read the script, that was like one of the intriguing things to me, was that it was so hard. It was hard to parse what was real and what wasn't. And it turns out most of it is like 100% real and accurate, which is kind of cool. Okay, so we need to make this a nice call shot. So let's do that. I want it to do something equivalent to this. And these are just panel borders that we're kind of filling in. And then from there, we'll make the thumbnail that we worked on episode 280 into blue lines to kind of place below. And yeah. Okay, so there we go. We've got that. And then we have... So I'm kind of thinking about potentially us doing commentary. It might be a little tough to do commentary whilst working on roughs. So we'll have to kind of just play it by ear. But I will tell you, there's been, again, some strange disturbances in the world of Kremble in the house. And it's an awfully weird time to be working on comics, you know? To be
working on comic books.
I'm here all night. All right. Enough of this voice changer stuff. It's kind of addictive, though. It is kind of fun to be able to, I don't know. I'm glad, thanks to Scott and Corey, who probably didn't tell me about this voice changer for a while because they might have been afraid of me unleashing the beast. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I think I'm considering like right now I'm just using the free version of it, but I'm considering it might be worth the yearly fee to kind of get all the extras, because I bet you can probably do like different people and stuff like that, and that'd be funny for like the little bits we do occasionally on this show. Yeah. So anyhow, so what we're doing now is just kind of, I don't know why I just connected that. Hold on. Also, if it looks like I'm a little teary-eyed, you have to forgive me. I have massively bad allergies, and this season right now is freaking crazy, you guys. It's like everything is in bloom, and for people who get bad allergies, this is like one of the worst seasons. I guess it's kind of bad once you kind of begin summer, but then like once you're in kind of midsummer, it starts getting kind of crazy. I think that might be a little too short, the second one. So we'll kind of give it a little more room. So I thought it might be fun to do a recent kind of political debate that I watched one, but because it's interesting, because like I personally, watched it and felt like one person performed really well and one person kind of performed well. Oh, to be fair, one of the people in it performed really well. Well, performed okay, like acceptably. And then at the very end of it, the other person who wasn't kind of doing super great in the debate, they weren't doing terrible, but they kind of made up for it with like the last like 20 minutes of the debate where they kind of destroyed the other person. So it was an interesting conversation, but I also, because it's political, not that I'd want to avoid it, because again, I think, I've done videos on this too, where I've talked about how my personal opinion is I don't think you can avoid being political, in general, like in art. I think like the act of making something or making a story is inherently saying something political. But with that being said, it's definitely one of those ones where, oh, nice. Thomas said it was a wet spring. Same here in Las Vegas. Yeah, exactly. It's all the, earlier this year, I ended up having to go to the doctor because my allergies were so bad. I was like, I don't know, maybe I need like an allergy shot or something. And then he suggested like a bunch of stuff. But I was like, wow, I feel kind of lame going to the doctor just for like allergy stuff. And he was like, dude, no, this is like, he's like, pretty much was like his whole day was just talking to people who are having mad allergy attacks. Yeah. And I got some of that awesome like prescription strength allergy stuff. So I didn't have to get the shots, which is good. I guess they don't encourage that. But I got some like pretty hardcore stuff, and it also helped because I had like a sinus infection from it. Can you believe that? It's kind of nuts, you know. But Thomas, I'm gathering from you saying that you probably get pretty wild allergy attacks too every once in a while, especially this season. I think if anybody struggles with allergies, I always have envy. There's like a certain group of people who I do not think are affected in the slightest by allergy stuff. And yeah, and to them, I would say, let's see. By the way, Thomas, could you hear the weird kind of evil voice that was going on there?
Because people who don't get allergies shall be cast away.
That's so fun. Like, that is so addictive. Okay. Yeah. What other? Thomas said, "I grew up in the green of back east, and never had allergies until I moved here." Yeah, that's the thing. I do think location matters, because when I lived in the Northwest, they were awful because it's like really like it rains all the time, and it's just like there's just every kind of plant. What I need to do is just live in a bubble and make cartoons. You know, that would be ideal. Let's see here. Yeah, so I think we are good to go. Okay, so I think we're pretty good to. We're almost set up. We have our panel borders. Now we just need to take our thumbnails. So anyhow, the thing that was interesting about that debate though was like somebody I agree with actually, on like the majority of points, I feel didn't really perform super well till toward the end. But it was an interesting dialogue, and it might be fun to comment on. But what I was going to say is, because I'm going to be working on roughs and those require a lot of focus, I feel like I can do a lot of commentary streams when I'm working on, say, let's see here. Did I totally underestimate the height of these panels? I did. We got to rework those panels. I totally underestimated the height of those panels. I also need to make sure that I keep a raw copy of this that's small. So anyhow, I feel like the problem is I feel like when it comes to political viewpoints and stuff like that, because it's so contentious, it's good to be able to have some time to be able to focus on what the content is, you know. So I don't know. Maybe I'll leave that up to the chat. If you guys would find that interesting to hear political back and forth, that'd be interesting to kind of hear what you guys think about that. Because it could be fun. It could be a fun thing, but who knows? So we're kind of adjusting our panel borders here, and I made them a little. I thought at first that I had it too slim, but it turns out I was wrong. I'd accidentally made them too big. And actually, that kind of makes sense because now that I think about it, I remember when I was thumbnailing this, I had the intention of having like a nice big first panel where we'll see kind of like Bosco's awesome little place. All right. I'm really enjoying the streams lately, though. It's been pretty fun. I know I've been watching Christopher Runciman's stuff a lot recently. I think he's doing. It's kind of fun, but he'll do comics kind of just based on like a prompt like that somebody gives him, and every once in a while I'll come up with just some dumb idea that I want to see him do. And one of the ones that I was just curious to see was Christopher Runciman doing like a Miami Vice type action sequence that's like all 1980s out. So I cannot wait to see how that comes out. I didn't catch his full stream today, but I saw that he was working on that and was pretty excited about it. Because I've always been kind of curious to see him tackle something like a Miami Vice sequence. Okay, so we have our panel borders, our thumbnails ready. I think we're good to go. And to start working. Let's see here. Just need to have all our references pulled up. We'll start with Bosco. So don't actually need all of these. So let's start with Bosco and get him penciled in there. And then we'll kind of work from there. Luckily, we have some like fairly, wild roughs here, but there's still like a good base to kind of work from. I'm going to call this rough. And then we'll get into kind of drawing this. But I you know what? Screw it. Let's watch. let's watch and do commentary. There's a particular political guy that I don't like. I know he's very popular online, but I feel like he's slightly logically inconsistent. But he does a lot of debates and stuff. He goes by like Tim Pool, and he's sort of like brands himself as like a centrist on the right. And then he is debating Emma Vigeland of the Majority Report. And or I think it's Vigeland. I think it's Vigeland is how it's pronounced, though. But anyhow, I like the Majority Report. I've been listening to that for, I don't know, like 15 years or something. And they can get pretty far, left, but I still like really enjoy the show, and I tend to agree with like a lot of their positions. And I find Sam Cedar really funny. But anyhow, when Paul Pate came on the show the other day, he was talking about the debate, and so I was like, "Huh, I'll have to check this out." So it somehow just missed my radar, and I ended up checking it out, and it was really interesting. So let's see if we can throw it on there, and I just have to get it set up. So let's do present. And then I'll do some commentary on it, and we'll work on drawing Bosco because we have it all set up. Let's see here. We didn't want to share a file. Present. Okay, hang on a sec. Share. Okay. And we're going to do this. I'm going to go ahead and hit share. And I think that we can go back to I think we had like a nice preset layout here. I don't know if my layout's got all out of whack though recently. Let's try this one. Does that work? No. There it is. There's our custom layout. I knew there was a custom layout for this. It's been a little bit since we did did some commentary. So this will be interesting because like I probably will not agree with Tim Pool on like anything. Just knowing just the way my acknowledging my biases at the beginning. However, Emma Vigeland, even though I tend to agree with a lot of her positions, I don't know how she does in hardcore debates. I've seen Sam Cedar debate, but I don't know if I've seen her debate. I have seen her have some terse exchanges with guests and stuff like that, so it'll be interesting to kind of see how this plays out. His show is called The Culture War, which is a little irritating because I feel like personally, I'll just share my opinion. I think that here we'll talk about this real quick before we get into watching the and commenting. But I feel like no. Okay. I feel like in my view, I think a lot of what's strange to me, in my opinion, about where the right has gone, and some of the left as well. And keep in mind, as I'm saying this, I'm a freaking cartoonist, okay? So what do I know? But I feel like it's kind of sad that people get stuck in these like culture war issues, and then when it comes to actual policy, they don't tend to have any ideas. So it's like I feel like the party on the right and some on the left too have become more about like these wedge culture war issues that don't impact 99% of people, being drumming up like fear and anger, and then everybody gets mad about these kind of wedge issues and forgets about like bigger things, like public policy things like that affect everyone. And so it's like becomes less about the policy and more about just like weird kind of niche issues that don't affect people's lives on a daily basis. And that to me is so weird, because I feel like, whatever your political philosophy, you should kind of care about like the hold on a sec. I like his wild hair here. We're gonna work that in. I feel like whatever your, political leanings or whatever, you should care about, policy if you're voting or anything like that. Like policy should probably be an important thing. But if you get let like a wedge issue about like 0.005% of the population or something affect your vote, and like you're voting for people because they're like, I hate this thing and you hate this thing, let's all vote for things we hate. And it's like, yeah, but what do you want to do, for the country or whatever? And they're like, I don't know, but I hate stuff. That's what I get kind of weirded out by. So I think that's honestly one of the reasons I've never personally watched like a bunch of Tim Pool stuff, because I felt like he kind of gets into like wedge issues and not always like a lot of meat or substance of like actual policy, which is fascinating. So that's been my kind of opinion, but that's just me laying my cards on the table. But to be fair, I don't really like, I've stepped back quite a bit from watching politics or anything like that in the last year, because I've been working on a crazy graphic novel. So anyhow, oh yeah, he's supposed to have his cape. So we need to have this cape, which he's going to be taking off in this, actually. So I want to have kind of a cape here. Maybe the cape has some, okay. And again, we're just kind of roughing this out, starting with Bosco. We can work our way from there. I feel like I want the cape to go back more. So this is an interesting scene too, because like Bosco is going to be taken, like basically they're meeting this character Bosco. So we're introducing a fairly new character, and I think a fairly fun character that might or might not be very important to the plot. I will say, knowing the writer of this book that we're illustrating, she does not do a lot of filler. So point being, like, if you see something in the book, it generally is going to have a reason. Almost every single part of the plot, I think every part has kind of an intention behind it that ends up kind of paying off later on, which I think is a sign of a good writer. It's one of the reasons I really liked Andor, the Disney thing, because I felt like Andor did a really good job of not having a lot of waste. Like, even episodes that had moments that felt like waste, and by waste I just mean like stuff that's just there for entertainment, but it doesn't serve the purpose of the story. There were a few things where it felt like deviations within the plot, and then it would come back and be one of the most significant things, and you're like, oh, they knew exactly what they were doing. And I like that in a story, and I feel like Lavender really nailed that. I think Bosco's hair should be even more wild. We should have more fun with that. It's just kind of should be even more kind of wacky. It's kind of parted to the left, so that's good to know. There we go. I think we've figured out the form of it a little better. And then I do want this crazy wild mustache. Okay, and we have to draw him from the front as well. So let's go ahead and finish up Bosco. Here's what I'm thinking. Let's finish up Bosco, and then after finishing Bosco, we'll watch this and comment on this debate between Emma Vigeland and I believe Sean Fitzgerald too, who I've seen debate Destiny. He's actually a fairly smart conservative. So that might be interesting. So yeah, we'll get into watching that in a second. But what we're going to do first is, so I'm going to go ahead and take that off the screen for a second. I'm a little concerned with the title of that people will think that my show has something to do with with culture wars. And again, like I care a lot more about kind of policy than more than like a wedge issue. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and finish up our drawing of Bosco. And then hopefully this will be interesting to people regardless of their political leanings, because it's two people who totally disagree. I probably disagree with something both people think, you know. I feel like there's kind of a health and an interesting, enjoyable thing about listening to viewpoints that you may not even agree with. That can be a lot of fun. Okay. We are kind of thumbnailing out our Bosco or roughing out our Bosco, and then we're going to take a quick break where we're going to show a trailer from one of my books that I mentioned at the top. And hopefully we avoid all the evil forces that seem to be in my house today. Because I don't know what's going on with that, but
Yeah. I mean, hopefully we can, avoid all the evil forces. Wow, that's so creepy. The noises in the background of this are amazing.
yeah. I know it'll get old soon, but I very much enjoy. I think I'm gonna have to pay for a subscription on that voice changer thing because it's pretty amazing. And I think they probably have like different people. There was one that was hilarious to me. Hold on a sec. Okay, we'll do one fun little voice changer thing once we finish. We just got to get through the Bosco first, though. So, they do have a voice on here that's called Karen. It's really funny. And it sounds very much like that. I need to speak to your manager. Like, I feel like when I heard it, it kind of reminded me of Jim Lujan has a certain. In fact, he actually kind of does that voice on the trailer that will play when we take a break for Wordzoid, where it's like. Anyhow, yeah, it's the voice like this. Anyhow, so maybe we'll mess with that for like 2 seconds after we finish this. His arms are up. I think we've got most of what we need from this reference. However, I like kind of having an idea of what he's working on here. So here he is working on. He's actually kind of taking off his coat or starting to take off his cape, and so that's what we're gonna have here. It's funny because at the beginning I was saying I do comics that aren't capes and tights, and yet here's a cape, right? Proving my hypocrisy. Proving my hypocrisy right there. What was that? Oh my goodness. And actually Jacob's apartment technically does have capes and tights in it. So I am a hypocrite. What do you know? There was this whole time in comics. We'll talk about this for a second, and then we'll get into maybe playing with some of the Karen sound effects. But there was a time in, like, I feel like it was like the very early 2000s where I was like really hopeful about comics and the state of indie comics in particular. You had like these great like kind of literary works coming out. It was around the time that like Blankets came out by Craig Thompson. And I had this feeling just as like a consumer and reader of comics. I was really excited to see, comics get into bookstores and like more literary approaches to comics. And it was kind of the thing. And you had these great works coming out, like just almost what felt like almost every other day. And I don't know if it's that I've gotten older and maybe more detached from like what's currently happening, or the cartoonist thing happens too to like most of us, where um we'll be so busy making comics that we like lose track of comics that are coming out, because like how are you going to find time? Like you can read audiobooks while you work on comics, but like who's got time to while working on comics read comics? Because comics are such a visual medium that it's not something you can kind of passively read or listen to. And that's one of the coolest things about comics, right? I think that's why they're so immersive, is the fact that they're very active. They really require you to be engaged and follow along, and kind of visually and textually you're having to kind of engage in this really cool co-creation of a story, right? Because you're kind of authoring it as well, not as much as you would with a book, because the author, in the case of comics, at least the artist or the cartoonist, has more control over what you see. And so your imagination's more like between the panels. Um, but still, you have like a wild, amount of imagination kind of involved. And that can be really cool. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with this. I was just saying, like, so I remember being really excited about the where comics were going to go, because I was like, man, it's so cool that they're starting to make like literary comics that aren't just for kids. And don't get me wrong, like comics for kids is a huge thing, and I've talked about it ad nauseum on this channel. I feel like the coolest thing that's happened with comics recently is all ages comic books and all ages graphic novels. That whole realm, like the fact that Scholastic is, making a ton of graphic novels nowadays, and the kids section of the bookstore is like, you know, a big chunk of its graphic novels. And the fact that things like Dogman are like bestsellers and stuff, these are really good things for comics. Because comics do need to be made for kids, and we can't get lost in this like everything has to be Watchmen kind of mode that I feel like a lot of comics do, where it's like it's Superman but it's dark or whatever. but I feel like but I feel like there was a little bit of a loss in the indie scene, and to me, I think it was. I see a lot of fantasy. Again, I like fantasy. I see a lot of superheroes, but a lot of the kind of more like literary attempts, I haven't seen as much, and the like it feels like an area of comics that like was just thriving in the early 2000s, and it felt like I mean, you had like even on like the kids comics stuff, which by the way, this is crazy. I haven't seen much about it. I don't know if it's out yet, but American Born Chinese is like one of the best graphic novels for kids, and that's apparently being made into a show on Disney, which is kind of cool. It's like, go Gene Yang. I'm glad he's making some bank. But yeah, like there was this era like Gene Yang, like Derek Kirk Kim, like a lot of these people were trying to do some fairly serious stuff. Like even though there was like humor in their work, it was like they were making literary works. And even like Gene Yang, like he ended up writing Avatar, and I love Avatar. But I felt like there was this era where it didn't feel like the future was indie cartoonists getting hefty paychecks from big comic companies to do properties that already exist. I thought the future was going to be like almost like you have like your like a JD Salinger or something, you know, in comics, like people who could make a hefty living, you know, doing important literary works. Not that everything has to be important, but or literary, but it's like, yeah. Anyhow, I feel like there's been a loss a little bit in the field. It's one of the reasons some of the newer kind of indie comic in quotes movements, um, especially ones online that kind of are just kind of pushing to make more superhero comics. It's like, okay. And again, I'm not against superhero comics, but do we need? Okay. I mean, yeah, that's a taste thing, but to me, I don't know. There was a really cool thing going on, and again, maybe there still is, and I've just been so busy making comics that I just haven't seen them. Okay, guys, we're going to play a trailer real quick, and then we're gonna rock and roll. We'll finish up these roughs, but before we finish up the roughs, we'll just play a trailer, and we'll probably do some commentary on this debate between Tim Pool and Emma Vigeland or Vigland. I think it's Vigland because from what I remember in Majority Report, which I listen to almost every day, I think it's Vigland. Hopefully I got that right. Okay, here is Wordzoid. And then, oh, wait. We were going to play with the Karen sound effect first. Okay, I need to find where it was. I think it was... Where was it? Maybe it's not even available anymore. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Okay, I love this one.
So, this is the Karen in Chief. I would like to speak with your manager. I would really like to speak to your manager.
So anyhow, that one's a little choppier, but it was funny. Okay. You guys are great. Here is the trailer for Wordzoid, and then we'll continue with our roughs.
Well, Peter, since I'm such a big music fan, I'm going to have to go with Karen Carpenter.
Oh, Stu, I'm sorry. That's the incorrect answer. Trish, what you got for us?
I'm gonna go with Kim Gordon.
All right, let's check that answer. Kim Gordon. Do we have a Kim Gordon? Yes, and that means you're our new Wordzoid champion, Trish. Dale, tell Trish what she's won. Trish, you've won a copy of 2 stories, a memoir of faith and mental illness. Handwritten, hand-drawn, and handed to you by artist and writer Joshua Kemble. But wait, that's not all. You've also won a copy of Jacob's Apartment, the story of a doomed romance. What happens when you take Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and put it in a blender with Ghost World? You get Jacob's Apartment, written and illustrated by Joshua Kemble. Trish, thank you for playing Wordzoid.
All right, great job, Trish.
I was told I was gonna get a lifetime supply of paper towels.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, and now we're going to pull up the screen and let's see here. Okay, we're going to go ahead and comment on the culture war with Tim Pool. Let me know if you guys can hear it. My connection's weird. Maybe it's not working?
Day works for you, and he's had something.
Okay, here we go.
I'm back. First thing I want to say is thank you to Jack Posobiec and Seamus Coughlin for guest hosting Timcast IRL while I was out.
Let's just cut to the actual debate.
Right, but the proof is in the pudding.
Okay, hang on.
Song we put out, played on your show,
Here we go.
And why they don't. And a topical news show doesn't really work for that.
Oh, I guess it starts real early. Okay.
And so we decided we need to make a...
Here we go. Okay.
Into the purpose.
We'll just start earlier.
When we do shows on Timcast IRL at 8 or so p.m., we'll often have people come in who are either disagree with us on certain issues, and or that's primarily it. When they do, the show transforms from topical news into political and cultural debate. And so we decided we need to make a specific show that just handles those conversations and expands upon them so that we can actually get to the core of what people think, feel, why they want certain policies and why they don't. And a topical news show doesn't really work for that. So Friday mornings, here's what we're going to do. And we were posting this at 1 p.m. Before, but now we'll probably end up doing it live just because. So without further ado, without wasting any of your time, we've got two awesome guests. Sean, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Oh, I'm Sean Fitzgerald. I do YouTube at The Actual Justice Warrior. I cover primary.
So this guy I've actually seen debate a few times. I don't agree with him entirely, but he's even though I totally disagree with him just on a debate level, he's actually a pretty good faith debater, which is kind of shocking to watch nowadays. So that'll be interesting.
Primarily criminal justice related issues, and I'm happy to be here for your maiden live voyage of the culture war.
And Emma, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Emma Vigeland. I'm the co-host of the Majority Report. Thanks so much, Tim, for having me on. I know that it was a little dicey with you and Sam in terms of him coming on, but I'm happy that you had me on. Honestly.
Absolutely, I'm glad you came.
Yeah, and it's. I just want to clear this up because I know that you didn't want to have Sam on because you called him a grifter, right?
Yeah.
And part of the reason that you called him that is because you said that we put your song through a filter on our show, and I just want you to know, I was hosting that day. We don't have the technology.
Okay. Okay. I think I remember this. This is a while ago. I think on the Majority Report, and maybe they'll get into it. I think Tim Pool has like a kind of emo band or something, and they kind of critiqued his band. The thing is, I don't think he's well known for being in a band. I think he's more known as like a political spokesperson. And as a person in a band myself, I love playing music and stuff like that, but like that's not my primary living. So like if somebody got one of my albums or something and was like, riffing on it or whatever, I think I'd be like, nah, okay. Like it means something to me, but like I don't know. It's not quite the same. Like whereas if somebody's like trashing my comic or something, that feels kind of different, because that's like more of like something I think kind of slightly known for, not known by a lot of people, but that's more kind of my lane. So if somebody's like critiquing something a little outside of my lane, like I love music, I did it for a lot of my life, but am I good at it? Yeah, I don't know. Anyhow, so it's funny that that's the first. I'm just mentioning that's funny that that's the first thing he brings up in this exchange is like, you made fun of my band. Aw.
To do that, so I did not do that. So there you go.
It was like
that up for you.
The song. So that specific issue was the song we put out, played on your show, had like the mids ripped out of it.
We don't have the technological ability to do that. We're just a bunch of leftists with like a soundboard. I promise you, nothing was intentional.
You don't have Audacity; it's free.
Well, no. The issue here is likely
I don't really
that
know. I don't know anything about.
If you don't have proper ingestion, then like the audio is going through a TV or something, it's going to sound really bad.
Right.
So if we were to like play music on the TV and then put the mics up to it, everything would be ripped out from it. And then if we were to say, listen how bad this sounds, it's misleading the average person into thinking that that's what the song sounds like. When it
but I played that, and look, I mean, we're here to have a great discussion, I think. But it's interesting that even though I played it, that was your justification for calling Sam a grifter.
Oh, it's not, though. The issue with Sam was that I put out a tweet where I said,
by the way, Sam Cedar, okay, Sam Cedar is an amazing debater. Like, he's a really quite talented. And I think one of the reasons people have difficulty debating Sam Cedar is he's also got like this encyclopedic memory of policy. And so he's a hard one to debate. Like, it requires a lot of prep if you're going to take on somebody. Like, again, I would get buried by any of the people we're watching in a debate. Because, again, I haven't, I don't spend every single waking moment, ingesting politics. In fact, I feel like, if I did, I would get really depressed. But it is one of those things of Sam Cedar is very avoided on the right, and he does piss off people on the right, but a lot of it's like he just kind of makes a lot of people look sort of foolish. There's a very famous Sam Cedar kind of ambush on Steven Crowder. That's one of the funniest things you'll ever see, where he just has that impact on people where they're like, oh my gosh, it's anyhow, so it's funny, but let's go. Let's continue.
We try to invite people on the left all the time. They always say no. And then Sam tweeted challenge accepted or something to that effect, like, I'll come on. And I was like, oh, this is great, because, Sam was actually the first person to ever shout me out ever in my career.
Yeah.
Praising me. And so I said, we will cover travel and accommodation. We'll fly you out. We'll take care of everything. Let me know what day works for you. And he said something like the 13th. And I was like, this is fantastic. And then he DM'd me and was like, I'm not coming on your show. And I was like,
it was because of COVID restrictions. I've seen the DMs. I told him he should put it on. I've told him he should put it on Twitter, but he's too good of a guy. I mean, maybe.
Well, no, I published all the DMs. Yeah. Because then what he did was he then it's mostly water under the bridge, but he made some comment about me backing out or something. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, and then I messaged him. I was like, are you kidding, dude? Like, we're going to pay for everything. And then he was just like, no, I'm not doing it. Are you crazy?
Well, then just do it. Like, I mean, I'm sure he'd be down to come down soon, and you guys could actually hash
the issue has expanded more than that. I mean, so at the same time, there was Hassan Piker, who also responded to my tweet. And he said, I'd love to come. And I said, when can you come? And he said, let's figure out a date. And so I DM'd him, and he said, I got to be honest, I'm actually concerned about COVID. And I said, totally get it. No worries, man. Thanks for reaching out. And that was the end of it. Sam, however, used it on like a video and then started tweeting about it because it was drumming up a whole bunch of clicks and views. And I'm like, okay, dude, I get it. Interacting with this guy is just going to create drama that he uses to get clicks. I mean, the dude's got like 170 videos about Dave Rubin.
Yeah, we do cover that. I mean, I think part of what we do is we try to respond to some of the right-wing ecosystem on the internet because there's a vacuum truly left. You guys have a lot more money than the left-wing media space. We just try to combat it a little bit.
I think the issue with that.
So, what's weird is just on what she's saying, I kind of think there's truth and there's not truth in it. This is my own opinion. Where I think that, my own take on it is I think if you're doing an independent journalism thing, I do think there's more money on the right for sure. Like a good example, I've joked about this with friends is like, I do comics and there is this whole grift that exists in the comics world where it's like, you can sell a lot of comics by just saying, hey, my comic's going to own the libs. And just talk about, again, like your comic could talk about culture war issues and stuff like that. And you can drum up a lot of support from people who aren't necessarily buying your comics because of your comics, but they're buying them because of your, because they want to own the libs or whatever. That's a huge ecosystem. It's not necessarily a huge ecosystem in the sense of like a lot of people. It's just a lot of money. There's a lot of money in it. Like a lot of people, are really willing to spend money just to own the libs, and I think, to be honest, I don't know if that exists as much on the left. However, I will say when it comes to like more kind of mainstream stuff, at least on the internet, it's tough to say, right? Because okay, you have things like, and again, it's been a long time since I've even had cable, but it's like I think Fox News is the most watched news program in the world, which can be a little frightening to people like on the left, you know. But I think it's got like the highest viewership of like any news program. So, you know, that's kind of mainstream. But at the same time, like, does a lot of the mainstream media lean left? I would say probably. And I think there's reasons for that, but I'm just saying, if I were somebody on the right, this is me just being empathetic. I could definitely see viewing it like, wait a minute, what do you mean like the right gets more money and support? However, you look at figures in the alternative media space, and for sure, there's way more money, kind of from being like a right wing commentator than being left in the alternative spaces. Whereas in the mainstream spaces, it's hard to say because, again, like, you know, the biggest news program in the world is right leaning, but at the same time, you know, quite a lot of left leaning stuff is also there. I kind of want to have these bird cages have a little more to them. But we'll just kind of see. Maybe we'll get into that when we get to the final. Okay. Let's continue.
That I can understand why you'd say that, but it looks like this is a great way to kick off the show, actually, like the start of the culture war. I actually don't think that whatever this space has more money, because this is a fractured independent space of varying ideologies.
Tim, I'm in your compound right now.
Yeah, I'm rich.
I live in a one bedroom. I mean, how did you get rich?
I started a website, took memberships, sold ads on videos.
Yeah, but the reason that you get ads and that we don't is because you more adequately serve capitalism, and we.
Oh, I don't know. I hate to say it. Like, okay, I love Majority Report, but I feel like that might be a little bit of cope. Like, there's, like, for instance, the biggest, streamers online politically are mostly left leaning, you know, and I'm a lefty, you know, but I feel like, I don't know if you can blame. Like, again, I kind of get it because, like, okay, good example. I do weird indie comics, you know, and the market just isn't as big for like the kinds of comics I do. It just isn't, you know, like, I don't think there's as much awareness or interest in comics that aren't kind of action comics. Yeah. That being said, you know, there's some very successful examples of comics in the genre or like the approach that I'm trying, you know, so it's possible. But I can kind of understand. I don't know. But I feel like saying like we can't get advertisers because we're anti-corporate. I don't know. I don't know if that's. I don't know. We'll see. I love Majority Report though, but still, I don't know if I agree with her on that one.
We challenge it.
We get our ads pulled. What do you mean? There's whole organizations dedicated to getting all of our ads removed.
Right, but the proof is in the pudding and where I'm sitting right now.
So this is memberships. This is almost entirely because people pay to become members of our websites. Like, you know, if the Majority Report, you guys have been around a lot longer than I have. Mm-hmm. The inability to provide a product to a customer does not mean that one political faction has more or is granted more because of capitalism or anything like that. Like, if Sam is unable to, I mean, Sam's had way more subscribers than me for a long, long time.
Right.
And he just like hit. And I'm not saying this to be like mean. I'm saying if he doesn't know how to turn revenue, the issue is more so you need like a COO or somebody who's going to say, here's how we provide something to a market that generates revenue so we can expand our business. So we're better at that here, I suppose, is the easy way to put it.
Well, no, because what you say here is more attractive to investors and advertisers. I mean, we're basically only members. And other right-wing media like the Daily Wire and stuff like that. And even what I'm looking at, the Rumble what I don't know, what do you call that logo right there?
Looks like a rectangle.
Yeah, I mean that's a David Sachs. That's a venture capital backed venture, I believe. At the very least, Peter Thiel is involved and invested.
Wait,
There's no equivalent on the left.
Why wouldn't
Absolutely
you be able to
not.
get advertisers if like David Pakman and the Young Turks have advertisers? Your content's not like too
We do
dissimilar.
have advertisers.
So he has a good point too. Like David Pakman and the Young Turks have really good advertisement, but again, like I don't think David Pakman has a compound. You know, like he's wealthy from doing it, but I don't know. This again, like this might not be super fun because, like, okay, let's get into policy stuff, guys. But still interesting.
We just have, advertisers that are a little bit more within our system of values, and we're trying to combat corporate greed. We don't have a ton of advertisers that I think align with leftist, or we have advertisers that we try to include in terms of like leftist values as well. But just by the nature of left versus right, it's asymmetrical warfare. But honestly, Sam should just put
you're
put those
passing on
DMs out there.
advertisers that don't align with your values. So
Yeah.
like you have
But we do the
those
same
options.
thing. We do literally the same. We have like 4 advertisers. We have
Right.
like 4.
Right. Okay.
So our website has no advertisers, and it's almost entirely membership funded.
Yeah.
So
I mean, look,
everything here is because people give us $10 a month.
We're really trying to cover politics on our program, and I think that that's what is like our central focus. I mean,
Why
you
make
talk
a
about-
video about me and music?
Well, I mean, it was a little fun because it was kind of funny. But I mean, Sam comes from a comedy background as well. I would say that I think you misrepresent what our show actually does. The first hour, the free hour of our program before we go to the membership portion, is one that we literally have experts on social security,
Yep.
on international politics. It's not honestly something that is conducive to it's dry. It's not conducive necessarily to a ton of capital investment or advertisers.
Thomas was saying, remember, Tim is in Western Maryland, West Virginia, very cheap there. Yeah, for sure. And like, yeah, it's just an interesting thing, but I don't know if I agree with the, I feel like it's hard to say. Okay. Like, good example. Eric July is kind of a right-wing commentator who, ran a Kickstarter campaign for a comic. I don't even know if it was on Kickstarter. It might have been his own campaign for a comic with the premise of, basically like riding the train of like the Comicsgate thing, and ends up raising, I can't even remember how many $1 million to fund his comic, there is an audience that's hungrier. I don't know. I think there is an audience that's very hungry to fund stuff based on culture war issues rather than on the content itself. And I think that audience, I have to admit, I think leans probably a little more right than left. However, there's some of that on the left. I just think the right is probably just better at monetizing it. However, does it mean you should kind of, I don't know. Does that mean that it's hard to kind of parse whether that means much? I mean, to me, like if I think of it in our own turf, I do think it's kind of lame that, right or left, I feel like there's a million better comics out there than Eric July's. And it is a little sad that that's the one that raised like these multi-millions of dollars. Because I just feel like the guy can't draw. He can't write. He's not a good writer. But he's got millions of dollars. Now, however, he did hire an artist. The artist looks like a decent artist, and that's an artist getting work, and that's people getting work in comics. So it's like, I don't know. I'm just trying to like empathize with Emma's viewpoint here, but yeah, that's a fair point. Thomas was saying, why would leftist leaning companies spend money on small websites? when they basically have major networks and newspapers, and they have a lot of the major networks and newspapers. That's the hard part, though. It's like, it's not, it's, yeah, I don't think I agree with Emma here. There is a very powerful money machine on the right, but I think that there is, and I would make the argument. I've said this to people who lean right quite often. It's like a lot of people complain that the arts in general are kind of dominated by left-leaning people. Yeah, Adam was saying Eric July was famous as a musician and political commentator before he started doing comics. Yeah, I mean, he was famous as a political commentator. I don't know if his music was famous, but it's like libertarian hardcore. So it's like Rage Against the Machine, ish, with just like very like anti-taxes kind of songs and stuff. But anyhow, the thing that's interesting is like it's a hard thing to answer because there is a lot of money like on the like the right is willing to spend a ton of money to fund like these sort of self-fund, like these sort of small ventures. But Thomas has a point in the sense that okay, that was the point I was getting at. So the reason I think, this is my own theory, the reason I think a lot of artists and art related things like creative endeavors and stuff like that are kind of dominated by the left. Oh, nice. Adam said, just tuned in. Hope things are going well, Josh. They are. I'm working on thumbnails and was commenting on a Tim Pool versus Emma Vigland. Thomas said when a market is underserved, any service gets a lot of attention. I agree with that. But here's the thing I think about the market being underserved. This is my own theory. I think that growing up in a conservative area, like 100%, I had conservative parents, like, very like typical kind of conservative city. Very red. Like the district at that point was like 100% red, where it was like very pro like George Bush, pro like Reagan was the best thing that ever happened. This was like their kind of take on things. And it took me a long time to kind of change my mind on that. Because when I was like a teenager, I was very much like a conservative. I read like Ayn Rand and was like, oh man, I'm all about libertarianism and stuff. I was like all bought in. And then I kind of shifted as I learned more. And that doesn't mean that happens to everybody. But one thing I'll say growing up is people on the right do not encourage art. And I don't mean to blanket judge. I'm just saying from my own experience. It's kind of like art is always viewed as like that's not a real job. Like you need to get a real job. You need to get like real commerce. Like because a lot of it's about like sort of, financial responsibility and stuff like that. So I feel like a lot of artists on the right have been dissuaded from doing art. And then you end up with this very small minority of artists that are right leaning. And then what you end up having is the right's just not delivering art as good. And I hate to say it that way, but it's like, like even with Eric July, like from what I understand, I don't think it's that good. And that's the sad part. It's like, I'm left leaning and I actually think it would be really cool if his comic was just expertly written. If it was expertly written, then it's like, oh my gosh, like this is like proof in the pudding. Like this is going to be a game changer. This is going to like shake up the left, or you know what I mean? Like that would be cool. It makes something so good that people can't argue with it. I mean, there's a whole long history of indie cartoonists that are right leaning, and have been fine and are revered, I mean, like, when I think about like Steve Ditko was like a freaking hardcore libertarian. These people have existed in the markets, but the problem is, I think if you're going to make an argument, you need to make it well, and you need to make it with good, solid art. And until the right stops making like kind of weird, like off-brand, like, and this is just me blanket generalizing, but I'm just saying, like, if you're trying to kind of present a better media, and your movies are like, here's a person, I'm going to write a script that's a hack, like, version of like a Western, and we're going to hire the person who got fired for being conservative to be the lead. And then the script is trash. The production quality is trash. The whole thing's just awful. Like, and yet it makes a ton of money because people want to see that. They want to see the alternative. I just feel like those people are getting grifted. And I think, like, the right, in my opinion, I think, again, I know some right-leaning artists in my own life that are very good. I would say, of like the more kind of right-leaning cartoonists, like Doug TenNapel's an interesting case, because I totally disagree with Doug TenNapel. I've seen tweets of his, like, I used to follow him on Twitter because I liked his art, and I had to unfollow him just because it gets so toxic, like, in my opinion, from where I lean politically. However, there is no way in hell I would say he's a bad artist or a bad writer. He's actually a really good writer and a really good artist. And so that makes his case a lot stronger politically, because he's delivering like quality art that like most cartoonists would look at and be like, wow, this is pretty like amazing drawing. Like the writing's solid. Again, like that's what I'm talking about. I don't know if that makes sense. Thomas says creativity tends to cluster more on the left-leaning trait openness, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think it's also just the fact that I think there's more of a culture of art that is encouraged. And I think that the right needs to start really pushing art. Like, not just pushing art like trying to ask for it, but pushing art like trying to train artists, like train some young artists up, get better artists, encourage like more participation and stuff like that. But I will tell you, when I went to art school and stuff, there were right-leaning people there. But again, it's like, I just think like you need to make better art. That's all, and I don't think like ISOM or whatever is going to answer that. Now, is it cool that somebody made a bunch of money making comics? Yeah, I think it would have been way cooler if it had been somebody who actually made comics. Like actually, even for that whole movement, I do think it's much cooler for people in that movement who've been cartoonists and know the game, and kind of know the battle, and a lot of them draw and write. I think that's great. But I think once you start getting into that, like, I'm kind of like this famous political commentator and I want to make this thing to own the libs, that kind of sucks. That's my own opinion. Anyhow, we're at the hour mark. If you disagree or agree, you better chime in the chats. Because regardless, the drama's fun. Let's get into, let's see here. Let's get into a break real quick. I'm going to play a trailer for my comic, which I've now opened up, massive criticism for, I'm sure, where people are like, well, you're on the left and you're not making good art. But anyhow, so I'm going to play the trailer for one of my comics that that supports the left industrial complex. And then we'll come back and watch more of this interesting debate. We haven't gotten very far in, but one of the fun things about commentary videos is it opens up a lot of interesting dialogue and conversations, because these are things I probably wouldn't have even talked about until I'm kind of reacting. And then suddenly when I'm reacting, it brings up interesting ideas and content. So yeah. And let's do the trailer for Jacob's Apartment. I'll be right back.
certain things, they split at the seams.
Okay, is this working now? Let's see here. Okay, I think we got it fixed. So it was actually that little voice modulator thing that I was messing with um, earlier. So we won't get any more cool voice effects. Sorry, guys. The demon voices will not be returning. Okay, I think we're good. So I was actually on a really good rant there for a second. I was gonna say, if you guys want more of the of the commentary on the video, let me know in the chats to just say, hey, let's just play the video. But I feel like this is opening up a really interesting conversation. So I saw an interesting thing recently, and this is just on the topic of kind of making better art for, like, you know, regardless of your political stripes, like just make good art. There was a thing I watched recently, and again, I don't pay a ton of attention to, you know, the whole Comicsgate movement and stuff like that. But there was a thing that I saw recently where this guy, Eric July, had he likes to kind of take people who are critics of his work and just kind of like pretty much fundraise off of them, which again is good marketing. But he had a critic on who's somebody on the right, and he had like a 6-person panel of all of his friends just kind of like trying to defend his book against like this person's like pretty fair critique of just like bad. Yeah, Thomas was saying Josh broke his toy 100%. So he had like a fair critique of that book Isom, and just story problems of it. And, you know, basically, like, as the guy was kind of getting attacked by all these people, he finally just asked all the people on the panel, you know, how many of you guys own Isom or whatever? And they all raised their hand. And then he's like, okay, how many of you have read it? And all these people who were like defending it, like to the teeth, like they're just like hardcore, just like the, you know, saying things like this is the most important thing that's happened for like right leaning comics and like the world and stuff like that. None of them had read it. And so they were like just dying to say it was this important piece of work, but none of them had read the work, and all of them owned it. So to me, that's like a signifier. Like there's this whole community of people who are willing to spend money just to have the object, but they're not comics readers. Like that's what I'm getting at. Not saying they're not all comics readers, but that's just something like that was interesting. And I feel is a problem, you know, like I would be bothered by that if I was right leaning. I would be like, what the hell's wrong with this? Right. A good parallel to that. And by the way, let me know in the comments if this is an interesting train of conversation, or if you want to get back to the commentary, as we're working on roughs anyway. So, but, okay. So a good equivalent to that is like, I'm a Christian, right? And I'm a Christian who's like left leaning, which is a weird thing in this world. But you know, I definitely am a Christian. And one of the things that I feel is really weak in the Christian movement is the art movement. Like the whole supposed Christian art thing is just hideous. Like there's a whole culture of, now it's gotten a little bit better than when I was a kid, but it's like there's this whole I should give a little background here too. So my father was a graphic designer, he was an architect, he did all these different things, right? But there was a point in time where let's see, there was a point in time where my father, after like we moved, we kind of got really poor pretty fast. And so my dad ended up managing a Christian bookstore. That was actually a job that he had when I was in like 4th through 6th grade. And I remember, like, because he was managing that store, and when I get out of school, like my mom was still at work and it was like walkable from the school I was going to, I would walk over there and kind of hang out in the store for like hours, like, because it's like I'm off school, but I'm like stuck in a Christian bookstore. Okay. And I have to say, like, even him, like, managing this place just felt like really weird about the books. Like, he couldn't stand like most of the books. My dad was a big fan of books and literature, and like Tolkien and Lewis, and like these really important, very good, talented, you know, religious writers. And then you have like Sweet Valley High and like these weird like knockoff stories, like that are really, they're kind of bad books, but like in this subculture, these poorly written books can like explode because people are just hungry to spend money on anything branded Christian and branded safe that's kind of playing the culture war thing. And as a fan of music, that always bugged me too, because Christian bands tend to be awful. Like most, at least back then, they tended to be awful. And so you had these bands like DC Talk that if you put on a like mainstream level would just get annihilated, like crushed, like they were awful. But they blew up because there's this whole evangelical culture that's going to like prop them up as like, this is great. Like they'd even call it hip hop. And it's like, it's not good music. and there was so much of that. Like there was a lot of like Christian rock, and it was like awful. And most of it was like ripoffs of current existing Christian rock or existing rock, and then just kind of putting God in the lyrics. And it's like such a bad representation of Christians. Like, and I've always felt, this is just the way I felt even back then. And I remember even back then there were Christian comics and they were awful. You know, they had a little comic rack at the bookstore, and I was a huge comics nerd. So I was like reading Spawn and all this stuff. And then I'm expecting like, oh man, this is going to be really cool. And it was like awful. It would be like, I'm, you know, a motorcycle helmet wearing, I can't remember the name of it. I'll have to like dig through my long box and find some of these like old Christian comics, but they were pretty bad. And they just didn't compare. And then it's like one of those things of like, but it's Christian. So you should suddenly support it, or that's all you should consume. Like your taste should just disappear and you should just support it because it's Christian. And that to me has always like been a problem, because, and this goes for like right, left, anything, my own, and you know, Christian, atheist, whatever you believe, make good art. That's it. Like just make good art. And then like, you know, you can defend your beliefs in your art, you know, like that's the trick. Like, you know, make good music. Like Sunny Day Real Estate, one of my favorite bands. Jeremy Ennick, the lead singer, hardcore Christian. That band is one of the most important bands that existed in rock and roll. Half the members of the band are the Foo Fighters currently. That's making solid music, you know. Do Me Without You. There's another like Christian band. You know, Christians in a band, but they don't call themselves a Christian band. That's the thing. They're just Christians that happen to make music. That's the thing. That's the trick. Don't be a Christian band. Don't be a Republican artist, right? Just be a good artist and then happen to be a Republican, right? Don't be a leftist artist. Just make good art and then happen to be left leaning and make your arguments, you know. That's all. I don't know. That was my tangent. I'm fired up, guys. Is this at all interesting? I hope this is an interesting topic. Yeah, Thomas was saying, I think you could say the same for the other side. The big companies make comics that are supposed to attract leftists, but sales suck. But they kind of do, but then they kind of don't, right? Because that's even technically kind of weird, where I see a lot of the time they'll fudge the numbers, and I'm just saying some of these channels and stuff will fudge the numbers, and they like look only at sales of floppies and not at graphic novel sales. And then anytime you bring up something like Dogman, you know, they're like, well, yeah, but that's not comics. And it's like, what? Well, no, it is. Well, Scholastic's not comics. It's like, no, Scholastic. That's like saying Scholastic doesn't make books. No, those are comics. You know, Raina Telgemeier, like these are cartoonists. You know, and it's like the idea that like these are not high selling books. I don't know. There's an ignorance to like what's going on with the comic scene, you know. But again, like here's the other thing, and this is the thing I never understood, you know. And this is where I'm going to lose everybody. You know, a lot of superhero comics just kind of suck, like they always have. Like, you know, and I'm very fond of superhero comics because like I grew up with them and stuff, but like a lot of comics suck and are gimmicky, and they've been that way for a long time. I mean, you think about what's his name? I mean, Batman, right? Why did I blank out on Batman? You think about like Batman, right? And like Batman, this is pre what people think was like the left thing, where the writing got so terrible they came up with a thing called a Lazarus pit to resurrect dead characters so they could just eternally kill off and resurrect every character. And it's like, that's, there's sometimes where you can have like a resurrection theme in a story that kind of works, but once you kind of get rid of death in a story, you've gotten rid of all the stakes. And then if you get rid of death in stories, not only do you get rid of the stakes of death, but like you also end up in a scenario where like, if somebody does defy death, it's just kind of like, meh, okay. Like, think about it. If you watched any superhero movie now and you see a character just clearly get killed, if you see them again in a movie, are you really that stunned at this point with comics? I mean, is it really that? Because, they're going to do something like, oh, we got to travel through time and resurrect the character. Like, and the reason they're doing this has never been about good writing. It's been about like, hey, we're making a lot of money with this character. We can't just kill them off. Like, that's killing our revenue. That's just the way it's been in mainstream comics for a long time. Like, if we're talking like Marvel, DC, and that's okay. That's kind of part of the gig. But like, if we're expecting, those companies to stop using gimmicks, then, a good way to do it would be to start making comics that aren't making gimmicks. And I feel like the worst response is to make comics that are based on a gimmick of like, let's own the libs. Like, that's just another gimmick. That's another foil cover. And foil variants, I guess, are cool, but like, come on, I don't know. That's my own opinion. Yeah, Thomas said, I haven't bought DC or Marvel for a while. Dude, I don't even touch superhero comics. I haven't read a mainstream comic in like 20 years. I went way indie a long time ago, which is one of the reasons it's kind of frustrating to hear, people kind of praise this whole like anti-lib, supposed independent movement. Because it's like, dude, no, there's been a thriving independent comics movement for a long time, with people of varying viewpoints, really challenging the medium, really doing new things, really pushing against the mainstream, And it's like, I don't know. It's like, it's almost like, I don't know if any of these like people have even heard of Fantagraphics. It's like, I don't know. That's the thing that's bizarre about it. Okay, guys, I'm getting worked up. I do need to grab myself another one of these suckers. Although, you know what? Never mind. We're at 1:15. Oh, this time thing is brutal. All right. But I do need to step away for like 2 seconds because we're at almost the 2-hour mark. I'll play. We're making some good progress, though, on this thumbnail. Or this rough, and let's play the trailer, the Christmas trailer for Two Stories. So the other thing that I'm thinking about here, just to kind of wrap up my little rant, and then we'll go back to our commentary that'll last for like 10 minutes. Maybe we'll watch the rest of this on the next stream. So the whole purpose of what I'm saying is that like there's not even anything wrong with necessarily the hustle. Like, whatever you got to do to sell comics, cool, right? I mean, we're in a market, right? If there's a market that wants to spend money to quote unquote like own the libs or something, cool. Like, yeah, sure, make a trailer that says like, hey, this is gonna own the libs. Like, that's great. But then like deliver. That's the point, you know? Cause like the second you drop the ball, like the scheme is up. It's like selling a really crappy like cryptocurrency or something. It's like the second, like, okay, Dogecoin is a funny meme, and like the whole idea of it was like, hey, let's make a meme that actually has value. And like, yeah, that's great, but like once the rug pull happens, right, and you realize like, wait a minute, like this isn't that good, then like you've lost all credibility for your argument, of like like whatever you were saying. And like, again, I'm not saying everybody in indie comics has to be making masterpieces. We're all doing the best we can, and we all have flaws and stuff like that. But to make something that is undeniably awful, when you're supposedly going to like take on and make your own alternate, economy and stuff like that. Well, to make an alternate economy, let's say you're like trying to open a gas station because you're sick of all the gas stations that are out there that suck or something. And you're like, we're going to make a good gas station. But then you sell like watered down gasoline that doesn't run cars. Then like everybody who stops at the gas station, even if they're going there to own the other gas stations, they're going to run out of gas, right? Because it's just you're selling snake oil. And like, that's the part that sucks. I don't mind the hustle. Again, like, hustle, like, sure, like, I'll get incendiary sometimes on my streams, and I'm not doing it to sell stuff. It's just who I am, so it's like, at my day job, I'm going to be more reserved and stuff like that with my opinions. But like on my own stream, like I don't see a point in like parsing words or like pretending that I'm something I'm not, especially because I'm doing like weird indie comics. But it's like, do I fault the people that I know who don't like to get into political discussion? No, like not at all. Do I always personally like getting into political discussions? No. Do I think you have to? No. But I feel like if you're going to use that as your sales gimmick, then like make it more than a gimmick, like, so more credit to like people raising money doing that stuff. But I feel bad for the consumers because there's always this talk of like a respect for the audience and the consumer. But it's like, dude, if you're spending more money on a warehouse, to house your comics than you are on like getting solid writers or solid art, like that's where I'm like, I don't know, man. It's more about the marketing pitch. And it's like, hey, you're really good at marketing, but like, again, the best marketing, I've heard this from times when I was younger and I worked sales, right? And times when I've been older and I've worked with people who work in sales. The best sale is a sale where the product itself is good, because at the end of the day, if the product's good, then you have the customer come back. That's basically good sales. But like, I feel like if you're selling comics people don't even want to read, yeah, I don't know. Now keep in mind, my sales numbers aren't great, so what does that say? I don't know. But I do think, I think anybody could tell that I'm putting effort into what I do, and I respect the craft. So there's, I don't know, there's that. That's my little rant. Okay, guys, enough of this. Let's watch more of this debate. What an interesting rant. I was not expecting. We got about 40 minutes left on the stream. Actually, let's do this real quick because I'm trying to do this more often. Hopefully this will work and not blow out my mic like the last time. Let's see here. Okay. Oh, that's fascinating. There it is. Ladies and gentlemen, you are tuning in to Joshua Kemble's live stream, episode 281. We've gotten into some interesting, kind of heavier topics, and we're working on roughs for page 81 of Not Death But Love, The Strange Supernatural Story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, which is a really big comic book that's being made for Turner Publishing. And we're doing some commentary on Tim Pool and let's see here, The Majority Report's Emma Vigeland, and it's an interesting discussion so far. We're about 8 minutes in, but we're going to continue that. We'll be streaming till about 2. Make sure if you haven't yet, you've hit that like button down there because it's a really good way to help out the channel. Make sure you're subscribed and you've hit the bell so you get notifications when we're about to go live. And now let's get back to the party. It is
and we're trying to make a difference in the world.
We don't have investment or
Sure.
we have like 4 advertisers. Actually, we have 0 advertisers and we got rid of them all. So
Okay.
we ended all of our advertisers. To be fair, on the podcast version of things, I think we have like 6. On the YouTube side of things, we've actually gotten rid of all advertisements. So now it's just like whatever YouTube does, they do.
Right.
And then we're starting our own.
I want to touch on what Thomas said. Thomas said, I think that's why a lot of people get annoyed at swapping in comics. They see it as a gimmick when what they really want is new and engaging characters and stories. I agree. I honestly, I think that happens both ways because I think a lot of the time it's like, again, the complaint is swapping in comics, right? But if you're doing a comic where you're literally just, redressing an old comic with like a new character name, it's like Superman, but their tights are a different color and their logo's a little different. I feel like you're kind of doing the same thing. And that's what I'm saying. It's like, make a better argument, like, honestly, the biggest problem is there's just like a drought of people wanting new things. And there's a drought of publishers and consumers that are willing to kind of try out new things. And I think that's something that only changes when creators start just kind of delivering newer and newer things, and then making new properties and stuff like that of their own. But I have to say, I don't think those properties are going to be the Rippaverse. Outside of, I think, the conservative bubble, I don't think that's the game changer, and actually I have to admit, I think that's sad. I think that's sad that that's not going to be a game changer because they have the budget to be a game changer. They could actually be like a bastion for people who are of that ideology to like hold up and be like, look. But again, I don't know. What can you do? I feel like the sad thing, I think the thing that's aggravating about it isn't the fact that it's right leaning. That would be great. I don't care. I lean left, but sure. If you see a vacuum, fill it, right? The thing to me is more the missed opportunity of like, with that much money, right? With that much money, all excuses are out. Like, you can't blame giant corporations when you have tens of millions of dollars to work with for one floppy comic. At that point, you can't blame the libs. You can't blame the movies. You can't blame corporate Hollywood because you are a corporation at that point. And what are you offering? And if you're offering more of the same crap that you've been complaining about, then yeah, that's, again, like, make your art your essay. Like, your art should be, this is what I want in art. That's my own opinion. Okay, let's continue.
Companies. The reason we started our own coffee company, it's because I'm not going to say the name of this person, but there are organizations that lie in order to get our ads pulled. And so that's happened to us. One example is that there is, well, I don't get into too much of it, but there's a group that has argued that I have claimed that Donald Trump won in 2020, and they've used that to raise tens of thousands of dollars.
Okay.
I never said Donald Trump won in 2020. In fact, since Joe Biden got inaugurated, I said Trump lost, and these people need to accept it.
Right. Well, you said there might be a race war. There was that.
When did I say that?
I'm not sure, but you also said that.
I don't think that's a true thing.
The 10-year-old who got an abortion, who was raped, you call that a hoax. Have you retracted that?
Hold on a second. So Emma is probably correct. Like, that probably is something that was said. I would imagine, being familiar with Majority Report, they don't tend to just kind of talk without backing. But big fail in the sense of, if you're going to bring something like that up in a debate, like a formal debate, you need to like have your freaking T's crossed and your I's dotted. Like, you can't just make, you can't just make an accusation like that and not have like, oh, it was at, 6:33 on this video. Like, that's what I would, again, I don't doubt that she's probably right, but it doesn't optically look good if you like make an accusation where it's like, you said this thing, and it's like, oh yeah, when did I say that? And you're like, I don't know. It's like, it starts to look like the no true Scotsman thing, the fallacy, or like kind of the it's not the no true Scotsman, it's a different fallacy where I forget, I can't remember the name for the fallacy, but it's like basically when you tell somebody in a debate, it's like, well, that's an interesting thing for somebody who hits their wife. And the person's like, wait, I don't hit my wife. And you're like, prove you don't hit your wife. Like, it just optically, it's like a real, I don't know. That's just a real, I don't know. That's an optical L in my opinion. And I like Emma Vigeland. From what I recall, though, I think this gets better as it goes. She kind of tears it up at the very end, which is unfortunate because we're probably not going to get to that part. So maybe tomorrow's stream. But yeah, like, I feel like, again, like, you might even have the right information, but if you make it look like you're making an accusation and somebody says, oh, when did that happen? And you're like, I don't know. That's kind of a problem. And again, in a formal, you're going on this show to debate, so go prepped. Whereas like, for me, if I ended up in a debate on stream, I'm drawing right now. I'm not looking up information. I'm not doing prep for debates. I'm not a debater. So I wouldn't expect me to have that answer. But if I was invited on somebody's show to kind of discuss and debate that kind of thing, I would hope that I'd have receipts, like for if I'm going to make claims, However, the nice thing about the internet is the internet will find out. Like, if somebody says, I didn't say that, the internet will find out. They'll find out if you said it. Yeah, I love that. Thomas said, what makes the classics is that the story comes first and layer in the other stuff. Exactly. Just write good stories. Write good stories. Or at least try to write good stories. Okay. And also editors. Editors are a huge thing. Get an editor. Have a valued, trusted editor.
Statement?
So there's very deep context to that. What we're talking about when I say
that's been
hoax,
proven. I mean, charged. The rapist has been charged, and the doctor who provided the abortion fined.
So this is a really good example of the problem in the culture war, I would say. See, you don't know what I actually said, because I didn't say what you're describing.
You did. I just watched it last night.
Right. And so what I said was The fact that they politicized this to win a political point is the hoax, not that the child was abused.
How does that constitute a hoax, Tim?
So, like, let's say,
Okay, that's an interesting point. So now we're getting into some interesting kind of meat because, yeah, would you call that a hoax? If I was saying something was politicized but true, but it's just being blown out of proportion for a political point, would I use the word hoax? Hoax implies fake. Anyhow, that's interesting. Okay.
there's what's a good example of this? Ahmaud Arbery. Ahmaud Arbery is a really great example, right? So here's
no, I'm talking about this example though, the
right,
one that I just brought up.
So right, if I can't explain to you that manipulating a story for political gain is the hoax, then I don't know
What's
what
the
else to say.
manipulation?
Oh man, this is an old story. I have to pull it up. I think the issue was that they were able to actually get the treatment in state, but because of the law, they decided to seek it elsewhere. And I said, that is a hoax. I didn't say that it was a hoax that the girl was abused. I said, if they could have sought treatment in state under the exemption, I think it was Ohio, right? There was an exemption saying in the cases of abuse, the treatments are permitted.
Wait a minute. Okay, this is going to be a problem. I wonder if she's going to get to this, but like, I feel like this is a tense topic, but I feel like the problem with that, right, is it takes a long time to prove. It takes a long time to prove those charges. And so by the time you've proven it, it's definitely going to be way past 9 months, you know? I'm sure that's going to be brought up,
but they decided to make a public statement and leave the state anyway. I said, that is a hoax.
It was not a public statement.
Well, but that's my point.
No, rape and incest exemptions are non-actionable. This is like well documented with abortion activists. How long do you think it takes to prove a rape or incest case before you're able to use that carve out to actually get an abortion?
Doesn't it depend on how the law is written? Do you have to prove it, or does it have to be alleged?
I mean, first of all,
let me just answer that point real quick so we can clarify the thing on.
Sure.
I never said it was a hoax that the girl was abused.
Okay.
That is incorrect.
But honestly, this is a part and parcel of what you do is you put that kind of statement out there and then you put caveats in to protect yourself.
Like
but
me saying that someone manipulating a story for political gain is a hoax.
It's not a manipulation. That is the kind of thing that's going to continue to happen as abortion restrictions happen throughout the country.
It
was a particularly egregious example used to shine light on broader restrictions on abortion in this country. I mean, it's an opinion, but you haven't retracted it. It's false.
It's not false. If there is a story and the story is exaggerated or manipulated in an effort to sway people into believing one political faction over the other, you are engaging in a hoax.
I mean, isn't that what you guys do when you post like extreme videos of crime and things like that?
We don't do that. What are you talking about?
I mean, you respond to videos that are taken completely out of context, isolated instances.
I don't think you watch the show because that doesn't.
I mean, I do a little bit.
No, you don't, because we don't do that.
Yeah. Yes, you do.
Well, that's not true because we don't do that. In fact, one of the points we make specifically is.
You show subway crime to talk about all these inflated crime numbers. Crime is down in New York City in 2023 by every metric.
Down compared to what?
Down compared to 2021 and
don't
2022.
Don't change the subject.
No,
right? You accused us of publishing videos we don't publish.
If it's down in compared to 2021, and there was a giant year-over-year increase from 2020 to 2021. Then you're talking about something that's
wasn't
down.
Giant. It was a small bump from the
pandemic. 47% increase in homicide in the city of New York is not a small bump.
It was homicides have been on a precipitous decline since the 70s, since the 80s, since the 90s. There was a bump because of desperation in the pandemic, and now it's back down in 2023.
So,
that's irrefutable. That's the NYPD's own data. That's on all major crimes: murders, rapes, grand larcenies, robberies.
This is an argument I'm often confronted with, and it's actually pretty terrible. So crime is down from the peak for sure, right? In some years in New York City, we had 2,100 murders. I think that's the largest ever in the history of the city of New York. However, my standard it's not as bad as the worst time in the history of the city of New York. When I see murders jump year over year from about 319 So 469.
What do you mean year
That's
over year? The 2 years that I just
year
listed?
over year, as in from 2020 to 2021. That would be a year over year
Yes.
increase. That is a dramatic increase, and it's the largest since
Saying year over year is interesting. Because the pandemic kind of caused a lot of crime. I mean, yeah, because people kind of went a little nuts. Let's see here. Okay, let's continue. I'm kind of thinking about this trunk. Okay, let's continue.
I believe 2010, the greatest year over year increase of all time in the city of New York, by the way. But it's all the way back to 2010 numbers.
It's down.
Yeah,
again.
it's down compared to the increase, but it's not down compared to 2019.
This was a once in a lifetime pandemic where people's desperation and their mental health was severely harmed. People were out of work, and that kind of desperation leads to more crime. That's the reality of how crime works. Poverty leads to crime.
I
would imagine.
This is inaccurate.
Why do you think 25 people got shoved in front of trains last year?
25 people shot in front of trains. That seems like a small,
I don't know, dude.
Kind of weird thing.
That's a legitimate question. You're saying that you're saying poverty and desperation results in crime. I'm wondering why it is that you've had these homeless guys. They've been predominant. I think it's almost entirely these homeless guys shoving people in front of trains. Last year it was 25, and so that's
a mental health problem. I mean, we do have a mental health problem in this country. We have an issue with not having socialized healthcare, where people are unable to access healthcare, mental health care in particular, but also every other kind of healthcare. I mean, 28 million uninsured people in this country. That's a massive problem. I mean, what is your stance on Medicare for all and healthcare?
I'm for universal healthcare.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah, I think we'd have to have some kind of like basic coverage for universal standard, meaning like if you're having an episode, this is particularly where we bring you in, we help you. If you're broken bones, flu, things that it's like relatively simple and knowledge based. The challenge with it is that we got limited space, we got limited doctors, but I don't think we can function as a society if we have people just dying in the streets like we do with drug abuse and
Well, then you should promote housing first policies on your program. Like in Houston, what they did, there was a pilot program under Obama. It was a HUD grant. And they reduced homelessness by 63% over 10 years because they guaranteed housing. Do you think that the 25 examples that you cite last year, and there's like over 2 million subway riders a day. So you cherry picking that, I feel like is...
It's not cherry picking. It's you mentioned that desperation leads to crime.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering why it is specifically that we saw this increase. Is it like someone's desperate, but why murder somebody? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, they're experiencing a mental health episode. We do not have adequate healthcare in this country, mental health care. I hear a lot of talk often after mass shootings that mental health is the most important thing in this country. Then we should have socialized healthcare so everyone can have access to it. And that paired with a housing first policy where cities don't become urban centers for...
That's actually interesting too, because I think it was Utah, I think a long time ago, that that had like a housing thing with the homeless where they bought them a bunch of houses and like their homeless rate like declined, like, and then there was like a really low recidivism rate, and I think the city saved like a ton of money too. That was a long time ago though. I'm pretty sure, like, I think it was Andrew Yang or something who used to bring up that stat a lot, as well as I think oh my goodness, getting sleepy, guys. Elizabeth Warren, I think, used to bring that stat up as well. Okay, let's continue. But I didn't know about the pilot program.
Just bridge and tunnelers who want to come in and see a show, or for restaurant associations, where places where people can actually live and there's guaranteed housing for people. If we were able to do that, we would be able to drastically reduce the crime that you guys are talking about here.
So when you're talking about poverty leading to crime, like what is that based on? Because after prohibition was...
I'm sorry, do people actually think when you're poor, you like the crime doesn't rise with poverty? Like, that to me is insane. Like that somebody would make the argument that poverty and crime aren't correlated. Like, not that all criminals are poor. Like that would be a crazy statement, but like, I mean, yeah, like petty theft, stuff like that. Like that's going to be really common in areas where people need food or aren't getting enough like resources. Like a good case in point is like if my son were starving, I would probably rob a store if I had to. Like if I was desperate and I had no other option to help feed my kid. I'm not saying that's why everybody does it, but I'm just saying the incentive for illegal activity goes up when people are desperate for money. Like desperation breeds a lot of bad things. That's one of the reasons I think I always advise, you know, like whenever people are asking me about like how to get into illustration and stuff like that, I always kind of try to. It's a hard thing. It's easier said than done. But one of the things that is important to kind of establish here, and I just realized this this picture should actually be on a different plane. But one of the things that that I realized, you know, as a young artist, it's way easier to get scammed when you're a new artist and you're really hungry for work. That's usually when the like kind of pitch the bad players that are kind of trying to get free work out of artists come out of the woodwork and have a lot of success with like exposure promises and stuff like that, because people are really hungry for work and they're hungry to make money. Like, you know, they're easier to manipulate, and like that, you know, that's partially because of desperation, right? So, and there's like a science to this too. So it's kind of weird that the argument's even being mildly suggested that the two aren't correlated, because if your basic needs, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs or whatever. If your basic needs aren't met, you can't even get into like areas of higher level thinking because you're stuck in like fight or flight mode. And you know, when people are poor, they're kind of like quite a lot of the time in fight or flight. You know, if you're working 3 jobs or something, like your rational capacity from like bouncing 3 jobs and barely getting sleep and stuff like that, and then barely making ends meet, is going to be a lot lower. And again, like, you know, you're going to be much more kind of instinctually ready to, you know, make a bad decision. I think, you know, I think that's just science. I can't believe anyone would argue against that. That's interesting.
Was
All of
repealed
human history.
during the Great Depression. Crime fell during the Great Recession. People with your line of thinking thought we would see a crime spike nationwide. It didn't happen. You could actually look at the crime wave if you wanted to pull it up. That didn't occur. And that was the largest recession in the history of this country since the Great Depression. So what we've seen throughout American history is poverty not leading to crime. What we actually see is the opposite, that crime drives areas into poverty. We look at store closures across the country due to the fact that we have shoplifting. That leads to decaying in the neighborhoods. When people abandon the neighborhoods and you see this blight, that has a psychological impact on people, and that drives people to commit these crimes.
I mean, you're working backwards from the.
No, you're actually working backwards.
Wait, but no. Poverty, clearly, this is a very simple concept, leads to something like shoplifting. Why would someone shoplift based on a personal pathology? They're shoplifting because they're desperate.
Yeah, it depends. Like Thomas was saying, there's very little correlation between poverty and violent crime. Yeah, but here's the thing, like theft, like I will just say, having lived in some pretty bad neighborhoods and also growing up kind of poor, it's like the incentives for somebody to join like an organized crime or like that kind of thing, like that's kind of how the whole thing works. It's like pressured by incentives, you know, in poverty stricken areas, you know. Yeah. But I don't know about violent crime. Like that's the thing. Like I think the thing that escalates to violent crime, I think it all kind of it's hard to say, but it's like I think it is all kind of interrelated, because here's the thing. So let's say need money, so I steal something, right, to sell and pawn or something like that. Or actually, let's give like a worst case scenario. Like I'll even steel man it a bit for somebody who might disagree. So let's say there's somebody who's like addicted to like heroin, and maybe they got addicted. I don't even think, I don't know, some drug that's like popular on the streets, and they need a fix. But part of why they got addicted is like they aren't able to get a job. Their life is pretty depressing, and like they don't have a lot of prospects ahead of them for the future. And so it's kind of how they get through the day or get through their 3 jobs or whatever, right? So then they need their fix. They steal something to get their fix. They, sell it, and then they get their fix, which gives money to like a drug dealer that gives income to somebody illegally selling things. And then in the illegal sale of those things, there's enforcement, right? So there's like the whole subculture of violent enforcement, because these are things that are existing outside of the law. And so they need to kind of set up their own legal structures. So it kind of becomes like this kind of cyclical thing where, I think that poverty has very much to do with it. But it also, yeah, like it kind of becomes like a sick cycle where the poverty kind of causes the crime kind of feeds the poverty, and it kind of creates this like spiral. But I can say living in wealthy neighborhoods in Long Beach, and compared to when I lived in really bad neighborhoods in Long Beach, and it's like night and day. Like anybody making the claim that poverty and crime aren't correlated, it just doesn't hasn't lived in a poverty stricken city. Like it's, yeah. But the both, I'd say both feed each other, and it'd probably be a really complicated question to have an easy thing. Yeah, Thomas was saying, I think it's more of a city thing and less so in the country where I grew up. 100%, because in the city you have compressed people, and high standard of living. So it's a little harder to make it in the city than it is out in the country, right? And there's always people who are like, well, why not just move, right? But there are a ton of people who can't. Like moving is not like that easy, you know. And if you're like having to work like 3 jobs to sustain like, a losing income, and you're just gradually getting more and more in debt, like how are you going to pay for a U-Haul, and you got to think of these like crime ridden areas too, because they're like predatory loan places set up. And then like, you have people who like really need their paycheck, and they see this like payday loan place, and so they'll sign up for like payday loans. And then like when they sign up for payday loans, they're at like absurdly high interest rates, which just escalates their problem because their next paycheck disappears, and then they have to take out another payday loan. And before you know it, they're like, $60,000 in debt. And like if you have somebody who's in debt by like thousands of dollars, right, they're going to be like, if you're massively in debt, like the attraction to doing something illegal would be like extremely high. It's part of why the mob used to recruit people with debt, right? That's how the mafia used to work. They'd get people really indebted, like a store would owe them so much money, and then they'd be like, now you're going to do me a favor. That's just how it works, man. It's how gangs recruit too. There's a lot of debt kind of related to that. Yeah. Yeah, Thomas was saying a lot of the articles I skimmed said it's very complicated and complex with many factors. Oh yeah, for sure. But I mean, definitely poverty is part of it for sure. Like, no doubt. But I can see like maybe there's a chicken or egg kind of thing. All right, you guys, we're gonna call it at this first panel being done, and I'm pretty happy with how this came out. I think we'll again, we're just doing roughs. we'll probably continue this tomorrow. So let me know if you're watching this after the fact or, whatever. Let me know if this was interesting and you want to continue this Emma Vigilant conversation. I will say tomorrow, I won't be continuing it because I'll be doing Artcasters. Scott is out of town, but we're going to be doing Artcasters on Corey Kerr's channel. So if you guys haven't yet, make sure you're following Corey Kerr, and I'll probably finish up this rough on that Artcasters. Thanks to everybody who's followed me and is watching. I appreciate you guys. Yeah, Thomas was saying once it gets started, it's a positive feedback loop. Yeah, because I mean, again, like, you live in these areas and it's like, yeah, nobody wants to live in those areas. And then you get poor people pushed into those areas too, because like it's literally the only areas they can afford because the cost of living goes down because no one wants to live there. And so what you end up with is just poverty feeding crime, feeding poverty. And like, I don't have it. I would never claim to have it fully worked out, but I would never be so bold as to say like poverty and crime have nothing to do with it. Because again, just all it takes is one thought experiment question for me, which is like, if my son needed food and I didn't have any way to get it, what would I do to get him fed? And all sorts of crimes come up because it's like, it's my kid, like my sole responsibility is to feed my kid. So anyhow, let's get into wrapping it and calling it a night. If you guys haven't yet, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notifications when we're about to go live. Go ahead and hit the like button. If you really hated this stream, go ahead and hit the dislike button. That's fine too. That helps as well. And let me know if this would be something you'd be down to continue. I'm going to write down real quick. So we've got wow, we didn't get very far at all on this video. We've got the Culture War, episode 18. And then we're going to write that it's at 1814. So if we decide to continue watching this debate, which I think we should, because I think it gets good, then we'll do it during another art session. Regardless of where you stand politically or what you're doing, I appreciate you guys hanging out and making art with me. And again, like I said earlier, I think as long as we're all trying and striving to make really great art, I think that the world will be a better place. I don't think it matters where you're politically leaning in the sense of like story and art. I think if you're making good stories, they'll speak for themselves. And with that, I'm going to close us out. So thanks, and I'll see you guys on the next, I'll see you tomorrow on Artcasters on Corey Kerr stream.